is a leader will say, this is what we stand for. This is our mission. And I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go and we're going to try and tackle the bleaching of coral reefs by getting AI to map all this, help us map the restoration of reefs and stop the bombing of the reefs by these pirate fishing boats. We're going to go try and do this. It's me and my friend, or we've got this money. Who's going to join us?
We're living in a time where AI is helping us move faster, optimize more, and scale beyond imagination. But there's a question I keep coming back to. What good is speed if we're racing toward disconnection? I'm Cien, co-founder of LaunchLemonade, and this is Human in the Machine, where we explore what happens when intelligence meets intention. Today, I'm joined by Keene, an impact entrepreneur, tribe builder, and co-founder of Rebel Book Club, Superfly, and Raise. For over 2 decades, Ben's been building communities where people don't just learn together, they build better futures together. From eco-islands in Fiji to AI-powered climate startups, he's consistently asked, what does the world need now? And how can we build it together? In a world that often feels fragmented, his answer is both innovation and belonging. So if you've ever wondered how to create connection in an age of automation, or how to lead movements that matter, this conversation is for you. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Cien. I love that. I've just written that question down. That's so good. What does the world we need now, and how do we build it together? That summarizes my work much better than I can summarize it. So thank you.
No, thank you for being here. So let's get into it. My first question. Ben, you've spent 2 decades building movements from eco-islands to book clubs to climate startup communities. What drew you to try building in the first place, and what's keeping you in it?
2 things drew me to it. Well, first of all, being pushed away from something. And I think the push away was when I was a student. And although I love that stage of life, the path into a traditional corporate job was one that I naively and felt in terms of my idealism wasn't right for me. So I ran away. I went traveling, went on big adventures, and my real learning happened out in the world. So I got involved with adventure travel and community-based tourism or ecotourism. So working closely with communities around the world and with the model of tourism. And the pull then was really around, wow, in these projects, we learn so much about humans and culture and economics and politics and business and the challenges we face, whether across all those different things. So I knew that there was loads of opportunities. And then the layer that kind of came into it a couple of years later, because I was traveling and working in that decade, 1998 to 2005, where really taking tech on the move, mobile was really happening for the first time. So this may seem alien to you and other people who've grown up since. But so, for example, things like an email account, they were literally just landing in our hands in 98. So to pick up mail when you were traveling as opposed to physical mail, pick it up online was radical. And then to be able to make Skype calls in 2004-5, we were doing video calls back then, and I thought it would take off much faster than it has. It took a pandemic to accelerate all that, 15 years later. But yeah, so I think seeing how technology allowed to be on the other side of the world on an island in Fiji, building an ecotourism project, but still communicate via a kind of BlackBerry curve phone from the top of the hill where to climb to get signal. But we got a Vodafone 4G signal, and we were able to tell this story and engage a much bigger audience. And that's what, for me and others at the time, was really exciting.
So I understand your why. I also understand the excitement around it, but how do you choose what you're pursuing? So these are, some of these things are very different, from book club to climate change to tribe building. Like, I know what drives you, but how do you choose?
Yeah, it's really hard when you're a curious human, as I know you are, and probably lots of people listening, to know what to focus on when you're interested and excited by so many things. I liken it to being when you throw a ball for a dog, the dog doesn't usually think too much about chasing that ball. It just chases the ball. And when I'm talking to people who feel a bit stuck or trying to figure out what to do next, and they want to have more impact in the world or be more entrepreneurial, I'm like, well, what tennis balls would you chase without thinking about it? Like, what do you find yourself doing without really strategizing or being analytical? And it's basically like, well, I'm always drawn to exciting events around technology, or I always end up reading these kind of books, or I've been drawn to islands or marine conservation or whatever it is. We all have these things. So I think it's then it's finding those things. But if you were to, for me, if I go back, and I'm only, just getting into this a couple of decades in, but the thread between all the projects for me so far is that question you asked at the start of this conversation, which is like, what can I do that's useful and helpful with all the challenges the world faces? Because I don't want to waste my time coming from a privileged position in the world, having choice over my career and how I spend my time and my work. I don't want to waste my time doing something that's not helpful or potentially damaging. And then how can I bring people together around this, or how can we join up to do this? There's so much talent out there, and there's so many opportunities with the tech we have. So that's the thing, and that's the tribe building, that's the bringing people together. And then it's just been like, what's going on? What am I interested in right now? And then it's about the experiment, right? The entrepreneurialism, which is, let's try this, and it gets some momentum and off we go. But there's been lots of other things that I've tried that haven't got any momentum. So that experimental mindset and approach is still something I try and practice.
I love that. Now, I want to focus a bit on Rebel Book Club because absolutely fascinated by it. You've grown it into a global community in a time when most people struggle to finish a book. How have you kept curiosity, as you were saying, and connection alive while the rest of the world is speeding up and scrolling past?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Shen. I think, so the Japanese have this word, sondoku, Tsundoku, and the Japanese are brilliant at having words that capture a feeling. And this is the feeling or the description of the growing pile of books on your bedside table. I have them on my office desk right now, that your to be read pile, right? They call it sondoku, but it basically means your curiosity is bigger than your ability to consume or learn or digest. And I think, as you've just said, that is heightened in the world that we're living in now, which is distracted, where our attention spans have been shortened because of the technology that we're now all involved with. And yet our curiosity, kind of paradoxically, for a lot of people, I think it's increased because we feel more connected to many, many different things, ideas, movements like TED, which is like you can, or going onto a platform like YouTube and learning about anything at any time. There's never been more knowledge in the world, freely accessible to most people, not everyone, but to the large majority, and it's going up every day. But the gap between that knowledge and making smart choices and being wise, like we're a knowledgeable species, but we're not a wise species. So I'm really interested in that link between learning and doing something responsible or useful with your learning. So Rebel Book Club is kind of that. The Rebel is all about, one, can we finish a book that we start? And we focus exclusively on non-fiction, which people say, oh, that's so niche. I'm like, no, it's not. It's like 30% of all books in the world. But this is not academic literature. This is all those kind of pop science, tech, business, social issues books that we love to read. But often it's quite hard to get past chapter 3 or 20% because we're distracted by the next idea or the next book or the next thing and our social media scrolling. So that's why we exist. Can we rebel against the typical book club model, which is like, we'll pretend we're reading the book, but we're not really. And can we also improve our reading habits, but can we also rebel in the sense that instead of just reading it, go, wow, that's so fascinating, that kind of psychology of money or whatever it is, can we actually take that and just tweak something in our work or our lives that's as a result of reading it? Now, not every single book you read is going to be a life-changing thing, but there's something in everything that you read that could be helpful or useful or could give you a slightly different perspective. So that's what we do at Rebel Book Club. Every month, new theme. We've just done our 10th birthday last week, in fact. So 120 months in a row. So it's been this, I think the best thing about Rebel Book Club, other than the great people I've met through it, has been the consistency. It's that kind of James Clear, Atomic Habits, one of our favorite books. It's like the, being consistent, like you do the same thing over and over and over again regularly until it forms a habit, in this case reading and meeting and learning together, and actually good things will come of that, and trusting in that process. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So I'm proud that we've got a good reading habit in our community, but you're right, it's not easy.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up question with that because I attended one of your meetings as speaker. There were over 100 people who attended that session. And I think that's quite special because in a time where everyone's on their screens and, as you said, can learn anything from you on YouTube, even on TikTok. I'm quite surprised about the attendance and the intention to learn through books in Rebel Book Club.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're right, all that knowledge is there, but people don't go out and consume it, even though they know it's there necessarily. Some people are very good at that, but the majority aren't. They need each other. They need a accountability, whether that's having an event in your diary like Rebel Book Club, which means that, it nudges me, it's a little bit of the boot camps. Like I've got until the last Tuesday of the month to try and get some reading, or at least listen to the podcast, or at least watch the TED talk on this topic. So people like that because it nudges, it's a little bit of the kind of stick. Come on, get it done, boot camp stuff. And then the carrot is just, who am I going to meet? And it's this feeling that I can walk into a room, and some of this, readers tend to be not all extroverts. So that, there's a lot of people who just love the learning, the knowledge, but they come out because they're like, I do want to connect with people, but they don't find it necessarily that easy. But we make it a nice, easy space for everyone to come in. And you skip the small talk, right? So you're just straight in, and everyone is there because they're curious about this topic, whether it's AI or this month it's autism and neurodiversity. So it's like, I'm curious about that. I'm going to go and learn. And we usually have experts like we had with yourself who come in and share their career and what they're working on, which brings this book to life, or the topic to life, because it becomes real. And then everyone goes home with something. So our goal at every Rebel Book Club is like, learn something new, make an interesting new connection or friend, and have the possibility of an action that you can apply, whether small or large, in your work or life. And so we're trying to hit all those things with our events, and it seems to work. And I think at the core of Rebel Book Club and lots of other community building or tribe building projects I've been involved with is this human need to feel like you belong. Right. And we all have that. It's very strong, and it's only going to become more important in this AI era that you and I are part of. This feeling like, oh wow, I'm in a community here who has a shared interest or a shared purpose. And as other bigger institutions in our world go through a period of change or start to break down, organized religion, mainstream media, other big institutions like banks and so on, we're in the nation states. We're in this very disruptive time in our history. People are humans. All of us are going, I need to find my people, because it's not represented here anymore, or it's changing. So that's why we're seeing this huge explosion in the well-being space, and lots of people trying to find their tribe through, whether it's sport or yoga or other things, food and so on. And then lots of people through entrepreneurship, and lots of people through learning communities like Rebel Book Club. So it's a weird time, but it's also quite exciting because there's all this new stuff. So that's kind of what we're part of, I think.
I'm still so curious about this. So, when it comes to matchmaking or building communities, the way I understand it, using a lot of data to find people together and then use that data to connect them together. It seems like the only common thing in Rebel Book Club that people share is the love of reading. What is it? Or maybe I didn't get to know the people more. Maybe it's everyone's the same actually. But what is it with Rebel Book Club that's bringing all of these different types of people together?
Yeah,
or is it?
It is the reading, of course, because the books are the heroes, right? In our community. They're the things that we build around. But it's curiosity, right? That's the core thing. It's like, I've always wondered about, nature and oceans, but it's not my core topic, and I wouldn't, other than maybe a documentary or two, I wouldn't probably go deeper. But if I attend this thing, the thing that people always say to us, and this has been over and over again over the last decade with Rebel Book Club, is I picked up this book because of, right, for example, here we go. This month's book is Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. So it's all about someone growing up and being misdiagnosed with or not being diagnosed with autism, and her way of like building a life and a lived experience, her strength of personality, her humor. And it's a way of going into a topic that a lot of people are like, I've always wanted to learn about that, but I haven't really. I've seen the headlines flash by, I've seen stuff on social media, but I haven't really. Rebel Book Club's a chance to dive into it for that month. And people say, our members say, I knew this is something I wanted to learn about, but I never had the space to, or I never had the reason to. And as a result, they go, I would never have picked up that book or come to that event, but because I'm in this community, I just did. And I'm not comparing that to church, because church is very different. But this idea of every Sunday going, or whatever day of the week worship happens, going to a spiritual place and someone sharing stories and saying, hey, we're going to learn about this today. I think it's not dissimilar, and other communities doing that, like, schools do that a lot. We're learning about this today. And just because you're in the community, you just turn up. And I think that's what a lot of people have been missing in recent times. And what's exciting, I think, with technology, forget all the downsides for a second, but it's actually being able to like accelerate your kind of, or connect your curiosities and your sort of like, this is who I am, with those communities and opportunities. And especially in the cities, you can go from these online spaces into the physical spaces. And that's what I've seen happen for 20 years now. And it's brilliant. But you've got to have the curiosity in the first place, which is what we're trying to help people with.
I love that. Now, speaking of communities and I guess tribes, you've said leaders don't just manage teams, they build tribes. What does that kind of leadership require today, especially in ecosystems shaped by AI and algorithmic logic?
Oh, Shan, this is a big question. I love it. All right, really, let me give you a brief kind of response, a non-academic response to that. So yeah, I think leadership, from what I've observed and seen both in kind of grassroots and startup, but also out in the world in politics and business, big business, the sort of old way of leading is like, okay, this is our job. This is what we're doing. Right, Shan, you go and do that. Ben, you go and do that. You're in charge of this. It's like push, go. And that worked for a very long time. Structure, hierarchy, blah, blah, blah. But now that doesn't tend to work in the same way, because people don't want to be told, and two, they can carve their own paths, right? They can go, well, I'm going to do it this way, or I'm going to do it that way. So what works better now, not everywhere, but we see in a lot of industries, and we see it in the creative industries, we see it with startups, and we see it with some innovative companies, is a leader will say, this is what we stand for. This is our mission, and I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go, and we're going to try and tackle the bleaching of coral reefs by getting AI to map all this, help us map the restoration of reefs and stop the bombing of the reefs by these pirate fishing boats. We're going to go try and do this. It's me and my friend, or we've got this money. Who's going to join us? Come along with us. And so people join the mission, which sometimes turns into employment. So it's much more of a sort of opportunity, rather than pushing people to action, it's like pulling them towards you. And so it's sort of, this is what purpose-driven leadership is. And it doesn't have to be super kind of earnest or like too high-powered or anything like this. It can just be, this is what we're doing, who's with me? And it's like the role modeling. So I learned this, I guess, a lot when I was doing the ecotourism projects. And I was really conscious that we were the people coming into these local communities to partner with them, business partners and cultural partners. But they were the people they were the leaders. So it's like, right, this is your culture in Fiji, for example. This is how you like people to dress, how you'd like us to eat, rather than going, we'll have a cocktail bar, we'll have so really trying to follow it. And then in terms of leading by example, try as a leader to pick the jobs that are most unlike the leader to do. So, on the island, it was like, well, what can I do? Which if I do, no one can really turn around and give me any grief, or they're more likely to follow the mission of the project, which is around sustainability. I was like cleaning the loos. So we had these compost loos where, fantastic loos. We could then put the waste back in the garden over 3 months, and you saw the whole, the banana trees grow, and you could see the whole cycle of life, and it was a really good visual of sustainability in action. And I was like, well, if I clean the loos once, twice, 3 times a week, people can see me doing that, then there's, I'm playing my part, and it's more likely that everyone's participating. You see this in sport, you see this in entrepreneurship. I mean, in tech businesses, you often see the engineer, Zuckerberg, for all his faults, potentially as a corporate leader. As an early stage entrepreneur and engineer, he's sitting next to everyone else. He's coding, he's building, so it's that like, we are the builders rather than the delegators.
I find this fascinating, because if you talk to me about, deciding who to involve in my tribe, my default is, okay, let's look at the personality traits and treat them as data and match these according to these personality traits. But something doesn't sit right with that. So I wanted, hypothetically speaking, do you think an algorithm can build a good tribe? And if not, what nuance would an algorithm not catch when you're thinking about tribe building?
Yeah, I think if you look more at companies, I think this is easy to state in terms of building sort of startups and early stage movements, it's very much people are just drawn to it. Like, the way we're collaborating together, who knows if we end up working in full business together, or we're partners or friends or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But when you're looking in companies, they're like, right, we're trying to recruit, talent and the best people here. And the ones that seem to do it really well, at least around well-being and then positive impact on their business, will say, I just like working there. The ones that hire for culture fit first. And so I think at scale, at Virgin, I think is quite a good example. I mean, you can think what you like about their different businesses, but they're very good and strong on culture. And almost everyone, I've worked a lot with Virgin Startup, their non-profit startup community and services. And almost everyone I've met through the Virgin Startup community and their other businesses, like, they really like working there, and they're really great people, but they're just happy. And so then you say, well, what is it, with Branson's leadership and others who've helped grow those companies, what is it? Well, they hire on cultural fit. So they just like, are these people? So, and that, a lot of that, when you hire for cultural fit, that feels quite an instinctive human thing, right? Oh, you can't copy, an algorithm can't copy that. But I think as we're seeing, and you're leading on this, like with all sorts of AI, it's not like the AI that's got the expertise. It's the data that you feed into it, and then its ability to process that data and turn it into a helpful response or set of actions or agency. So I've no doubt that AI co-pilots will become fantastic cultural fit recruiters, and maybe better than we are around our own sort of like, oh, this feels right, because big companies still have to measure pretty much everything they're doing. And maybe this is where it can go. AIs and humans can actually make better decisions than we have on our own, because they can be like, oh, there's a sense check, there's a human sort of gut instinct check. Our first brain is in our guts. That's why when you feel funny in your tummy, it's because either you're nervous, excited, or you're worried about something. It's because that's where our first brain comes from. So it's very powerful. So we're not going to lose that. Even though sometimes it goes against our rationality or the evidence in front of us, like, oh, it didn't feel right, or it felt right. People talk about relationships a lot like this. So I think people find that a threat to their humanity when they hear a technology is going to not just take their jobs, but basically take some of their humanity. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of people say right now, oh, there'll never be such thing as an AI therapist that'll be helpful. But, they already exist, as you know. And I'm no doubt that they'll know us better than we know ourselves. So I think this stuff is fascinating. I think the thing that matters to me, or the question that I always ask, is, does this application of technology, like hiring for good cultural fit, does this help us with our mission and our goal as an organization? And if the technology can help us, great. If it can't at this point, no worries, but not feel threatened by it.
Ben, you clearly are the type of person who follows that gut, and you've been focused on making what the world needs, so building for what the world needs. How do we ensure AI doesn't just amplify what's popular, but helps us build what's necessary?
Yeah, this is hard, I think, from everything I'm learning. So we've just done a big reading month, Rebel Book Club, on AI, and of course, these books go out of date quite quickly, right? Because every week there's 10 new language models and so on. But the book that we tried to read together was Yuval Harari's Nexus, which is, he's this brilliant historian, anthropologist, psychologist, and storyteller and technologist. And he writes very eloquently about where we're at on this path. And it's a little bit, at the end, he's a little bit down from a big politics point of view and on AI and where we're at and sort of the risks involved. But you can understand that with the kind of leadership we've got in the world at the moment. But yeah, I think it's really hard. I think as we've talked about, there's a reality, and someone else who I've read quite a bit on, who I think is very good on this, is Mo Gawdat, who was a CTO at Google X, so their big lab space. So he's been deep in deep tech innovation, and then he exited that, and now he's more of a kind of educator, and he's in this sort of space between humanity and tech, and he's a really good storyteller and commentator. But what Mo says is that it's here, there's no point hiding from it, and we have to work out the best way to manage this super technology as wisely as possible. I think the hard thing is that when you see runaway corporate technology power or big tech power, I'm going to use Meta as an example, and the algorithm is programmed to say something like, right, your job, algorithm, is to get the most engagement possible. That's it. And so off it goes, and that's great for when you're selling ads across your social your very powerful social channels. But it becomes a problem when it meets ethical, political challenges. So if it's in a country like Myanmar, where there's autocratic regime and they're exploiting people, a certain group of people, then it becomes very potentially dangerous, because the Facebook algorithms is just spitting out the same propaganda. And we can go back in history and look at media, and this is what Harari talks about, and you say, well, the radio during the genocide in Rwanda was a horrific technology because they used it to accelerate the war between the two peoples. Or the newspapers in Nazi Germany were horrible technology because of all the cartoons that were propaganda to cover up the horror of the what was going on there. And I think the risk is that we always sort of say, well, it's just technology. It's not right or wrong. But those of us, or the big technology leaders, they are responsible for this. And I think they're responsible for how, when you program an algorithm, what, the unintended consequences. So I think the challenge right now is that the power is so great in such a small group of people's hands. And we know compute power is 96% China and the US. And we've got this, and there's, a handful of billionaires controlling a lot. We've got this lopsided situation, and somehow we have to bring back responsibility into and ethics into all technology. But that's, as Azim Azar says, the exponential curve of technology. Governments, and especially governments, but also big business, are so far behind in terms of trying to catch up, because it's just impossible. Tech will always move a lot faster, and so regulation, everything takes longer. But I'm hopeful that we can do it. I was briefly part of a facilitating on a program called ARIA in the UK, which is the Advanced Research and Invention Agency, which sounds very sci-fi, but it's real. And it's a government agency, UK government agency, set up in the last couple of years. I'm tied very closely to their AI safety mission, inspired by Alan Turing and Bletchley Park and that bit of history we have here in the UK. And basically, they've got some of the top deep mathematics from around Europe coming together, all the PhD people, all those incredible minds coming together regularly every few months to go deep on these questions around AI safety and other big technology questions, but turn them into coming up with solutions or methodologies that governments and industry and businesses can start to adopt. So when I was part of that for a couple of days, not as a maths guy, so I'm so far from that, but I was just helping with some facilitation, I was like, oh, this is really exciting, because these people aren't locked away in universities. They're being brought together to apply their incredible minds to trying to solve and figure out these problems. So I think we just need a lot more of that.
And finally, Ben, I think you've answered this in a few ways, but I just wanted to ask, in a time of intelligent machines, what do you believe it truly means to be human?
Yeah, such a great question. We're just discovering this. I think what's so interesting, just personally, in the sort of couple of years, almost 3 years now, I've been playing with AI chatbots and now agents, is just like how much you can learn about yourself and through this technology, because it feels more human, right? Because it's impersonating us so well, and the speed of response is so remarkable, and the intelligence in the response. So I feel like it's elevating for those of us that are leaning into it, not just in terms of productivity and business opportunity, which is huge, but it's elevating it's pushing my intellectual ceiling up a bit, which isn't very high, but it is. And so from a human growth point of view, and we always want to grow, most of us, in a healthy way, our minds and our bodies and our learning, it feels like a really exciting time to be a human, which is a weird, I think that feels paradoxical because of all the challenges in the world, this confluence of crises that we can see from wherever we're sitting, but also because of this technological coming wave, as Mustafa Solomon, from DeepMind describes it. It's not just the AI, it's the biotechnology and everything else. There's a lot happening at once. Most of the time I'm feeling quite optimistic about it, especially when I'm hanging out with people like you. But I also hear a lot, and I feel it too, of like the overwhelm and the fear. And I completely understand it, because it's easy to be overwhelmed by it. And it's also understandable that people are scared. My responses to those voices in my head, and when I hear them out in the world, is like, okay, first of all, what can you do? What can you control? I'm like, well, this little bit here and that over there, and how I spend my time and who I spend my time with, and the things that I really care about. Great. Now, how can you embrace whatever this technology is to help you with that without being irresponsible. And we've just had this big discussion in the last few weeks, it feels, online and at events around the energy impact of AI tools. And a lot of people in the environmental movement have got very sort of like wound up about, ChatGPT and all these other models are going to use up so much more energy in the world. And the data and the reality is just like, this is not a problem. But it's fascinating. It may become a bigger problem, and we need to keep an eye on it. But it's so small versus so many other things going on in climate and nature, and they're much more damaging. But it's amazing. It's always amazing to see how quickly we can get worried about something new. Like, we don't need new things to worry about. There's enough things to worry about. So I think it's from a human point of view. Humans always worry, right? Because it's the flight or fight thing, right? We're trying to like stay safe and stay alive. But I think it's the key here in terms of staying more human is get closer to people and projects and communities that are leaning into this stuff in a creative and a responsible and in an innovative way, because good things will happen in those spaces. Good things will happen in terms of your learning, in terms of your career and your businesses, and in terms of the positive impacts that what you care about in the world, whether that's education, climate, nature, there's 1,000 things to care about. And so that's my mindset at the moment. But it doesn't mean I don't have doubts and I don't have moments where I'm feeling overwhelmed by it all. But most of the time I'm excited that I'm around when this is going on and I get to meet people like you.
Amazing. And that's it for today's episode of Human and the Machine, where we explore what happens when intelligent systems meet intentional leadership. Ben Keene doesn't just build startups, he builds belonging. And in a time when technology can replicate almost everything except meaning, his work reminds us that connection isn't a luxury. It's the infrastructure for the kind of future we actually want to live in. Whether he's helping climate founders get funded or reimagining how we read and learn together, Ben is proof that you don't need to scale fast to make an impact.